Hi, everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. My name is Ruben Mendive, and I am your host. Today, I have a new writer here in the seat, in the nook, in the kitchen, in the studio. My first question is always your name and how you identify, and whatever that means to you.
Hi, I'm Christen Gee Celaya. I identify as female, a U.S. Latina, Mexican-American, Chicana. I am a writer, a professional actor, sometimes director, singer, aerialist, and just a kind of overall creative person.
All right, perfect. Love it. And my follow-up question is always, where are you from? And whatever that means to you, just like, where are you from?
Well, I was born in Los Angeles, but my father had some very dramatic financial hardships, and we moved around a lot after that happened. And let's see, the trajectory was Los Angeles to Richmond, Virginia, then back to Los Angeles, then to Destin, Florida, then to Johnson City, Tennessee, then to Piney Flats, Tennessee, and then Knoxville, Tennessee, and that's kind of my formative years. And then I guess my adult education post-college came from moving to New York City as a young adult, and then Seattle for grad school. And then after grad school, I came back here to LA, where my roots are.
Okay, great. So let's get into that. So you moved around a lot.
Yeah.
And just like, what was that like as a child growing up? Moving a lot, like what were the circumstances of that, and like who were you at each of these?
That's a great question to ask, because I think one of these days I need to put that into a script, because when I was in Tennessee at the time, there was a shift in Tennessee later that came in like more around the early 2000s, really late 90s, where the demographics started to shift. But when we first got there, we were the only Mexican Americans, the only LatinX people there. And that was really sometimes comical and sometimes just jarring. It took me a year to understand the dialect there. And then it took my mom even just a little longer. And my mom is like fluent English speaker. Like we both like fluent English speakers, and it still took us. I remember there was a period of time where I was literally translating English to English for my mom, because in Piney Flats, which is very like East Tennessee, very backwoods, like all that they had was a White's grocery store, and we used to joke even the grocery store is White's, because that was the name of the store and the chain. And so it was very there's a lot of culture shock. There was a lot of alienation. That's where I first started getting bullied as a kid, because I was so different from the other kids, and I was bullied hardcore bullying. But there was also a lot of good things that came from growing up there, because when you're separated from your community, you really, really start to appreciate what community means in your life when you don't have it. Also, because we didn't have money at that time. Again, my father was trying to overcome these financial hardships, and so I didn't have cable. Like all my friends had like MTV and like AOL Instant Messenger. I'm giving away my age now. But like I didn't really have any of those things, so I just created a lot, and used to go for really long walks out in the woods, because that's what you had. You had lakes, you had woods. And I spent a lot of time kind of just on my own, because I didn't really have community, but I felt like that made me a creative person. And I want to get into, I always like to ask about parents and like grandparents, like what's their story like? So well, my mom has a really interesting my mom's side of the family is very interesting. So I'm mixed race. I hope I mentioned that earlier. I may have forgotten. So my dad's white and my mom's Mexican. And my mom's side of the family, I feel like we have like these interesting kind of stories at various chapters of Chicano history. So my bisabuela and my bistia were part of the repatriation that unfortunately a lot of even Mexican Americans don't even know about. I'm surprised how many times like I talk about it and people just have no idea what I'm talking about. How people were forced to migrate from where their families had been since as long as they can remember, because the border had shifted long before then even, but they were forced to go to Mexico. And my mom tells the story about how my bisabuela and my bistia, they saw that people were being forced out, and they chose to leave before being forced out because at least if you left voluntarily, you were able to pack up your car, right? And so you were able to take more things with you across the border. And then as they crossed the border, they were robbed in Mexico. Because they were seen as outsiders, as foreigners, and so they resettled in northern Mexico. And then my mom grew up on both sides of the border as a kid. She's the oldest of all her siblings. She was born in Mexicali, and my abuela at the time, they were migrant farm workers. So that's one of the reasons why they were on both sides of the border, because they would come for the season. Sometimes they would. There was a time where I know my mom lived with her abuela and didn't do the farming, but then there were years that she did live with her mom. And she tells this amazing story where twice she had seen Cesar Chavez. And it was when she was farming. I forget where in California she said she was, but what was happening was the picketers were shouting at her grandparents, who were also helping to farm. And they were shouting profanities at them. And Cesar Chavez came to the picketers, and he started, in that beautiful way you hear of his leadership skills, he started to rally the people to stop, because he said, no, that's not what we're about. We don't want to shout insults at them. We want them to join us. And if they're doing this, if they are still working, it's because they have to. And we have to respect everyone's struggle. And, it's like, what a beautiful story that this man, and people were rightfully upset because the esquiroles were the reasons why it was harder to get the good things to happen. So they were rightfully upset, but it was like Cesar Chavez's like leadership there. And like my mom was there and saw that. And she has these funny stories where she says, because she was so small, she thought Cesar Chavez was really tall. And so she remembers like someone asking her about that when she was an adult and not realizing that she hadn't recalibrated the story. And she says like, oh yeah, Cesar Chavez was really tall. And then she stops and she goes, no, he wasn't tall. You were just 5 and thought everybody was tall. But I think it was also like the way he carried himself, like the way she saw him in that moment, because he was a bit like a hero in her eyes in that moment.
Absolutely. And like, how did she like meet your dad? Like, how did do they have a love story? I mean, my parents don't. I'm always just curious about other people's.
Yeah, they have an interesting relationship. My mom, she flunked out of school when she first started to go, and she took up academia again in my formative years when we were in Tennessee. And it was my dad's idea for her to do that, so that she could have, means, because at the time she was waiting tables to help make ends meet. And so it was actually a really influential thing in her life, because he suggested it and she went back to school. She ended up becoming a PhD. Like, can you, like the trajectory, like just going from being like flunking out of school because you didn't have the resources to becoming a doctorate she's a doctorate in Latin American studies, border culture. She teaches a lot of Spanish lit, cultural studies, things like that.
All right, go mom. And like, why Tennessee? Like, what moved you over?
My dad had family there, and also land was cheap there. So it was he didn't have a lot of money left, and he wanted to create something where he could bounce back from his hardships. So he bought some land at an auction and was kind of just like, he developed it, but he did all the manual labor. Like, he was digging septic tanks and it was a tough period because I didn't really understand what was happening. I didn't understand that we were poor now. I just and I was sometimes, I think I was a bit of an annoying child at times because I didn't understand. Like, we can't have those things because we don't have any money anymore.
Yeah.
And my mom was trying to keep things as normal as possible. I remember this one year we didn't have a Christmas tree, and I threw a fit because I was like, I want a Christmas tree. It's important to me. Why are you denying me this? And then I was embarrassing my mom by accident in the hallway of my school. And I suddenly realized, oh, we don't have it. You're not denying me to be mean. Yeah. We just don't have money for a Christmas tree. And so, but she always tried to keep things as normal as possible.
Yeah. And how, because you said that there was financial hardships, just so for our frame of reference, what was how different was the change?
Oh, very dramatic. So, because my dad used to have a company that was worth several $1 million. He was the first person to create a shop-at-home network for clothing.
Got it. Ooh.
And his business was very vulnerable because he wanted his clothing to be made in the United States. It was still a time where people were still trying to do that. And there was an illegal corporate takeover. He had the option to seek to sue, but it was made very clear that he was out-lawyered. And the lawyers told him, you will never see that money. Maybe, if you're lucky, your grandchildren. And he has this, child has needs now today. Yeah. So he just kind of, as we say in poker, he folded and took what chips he had left.
Yeah. And how would you describe your household in Tennessee? What was it like? What was the family situation?
It was in flux because I had an older half brother who I saw from time to time, but wasn't part of my daily life or anything. Yeah. But when my mom started school, she got pregnant twice and had my 2 little brothers. And so also my mom was in school and I was at a babysitting age. So I did a lot of babysitting, changed a lot of diapers. And it was a really small trailer we lived in. So when the babies cried in the middle of the night, everybody woke up because it wasn't that far away from the babies to my room. So there was that. And then when I was in high school, my parents adopted my cousin, Judy. And that was an interesting chapter in my life that I think also one day owes a script because my cousin Judy's from Mexico.
Got it.
And at the time she didn't speak English. And my Spanish was so-so,
Same.
But it was really so-so. There's levels to so-so.
Yeah, it's I don't a first grade level.
Yeah. My Spanish definitely needed work, but there was a lot of miscommunications by accident that were very comical at times. But she's my best friend, my sister. But yeah, that was a phase where I was kind of introducing her to what is it to be American. Yeah. You
said you moved out there because your dad had family. And how was your relationship with that family?
Sadly, most of the people that I had a relationship to on that side of the family have passed on. I had a relationship with my great aunt and my grandmother, but and I was very sad when my great aunt died because I knew that was the end of a chapter there, because they were the only 2 people I had a real relationship with on that side of the family. So it was I was very heartbroken when she passed on because I was like, well, that's it. I do often feel on that side of the family treated like an outsider. They're not too subtle about and here's the thing is, I know if they heard this, they would be very outraged. How could you say that? And it's well, I don't say it to your face, but it's the truth.
Yeah, but it's your experience of it.
Yeah.
And your mom's family, were they still here in California? Or?
Yeah, so they're spread out. They're in Mexico, in 2 places in Mexico where most of my family are in either northern Mexico in a little town called Atil, which is not too far from Caborca. I'm always excited when someone knows where Atil is because it's such a very, very small town. And it's oh my God, you know where that is?
Your cousins.
It's always that joke often happens. And then also Mexico City, but just outside Mexico City, not too far from a little pueblo, not too far from Tecamac.
Okay, yeah. I know where that is. My family's from Mexico City.
Okay, yeah. So they live in San Lucas Holox.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we are cousins. And what was your relationship to Mexico, your like Latinx identity, just like growing up? Like, was it something you were aware of?
Yeah. So like most relationships, like all relationships really, that relationship had chapters, right? Where it's not been a one note relationship.
Yeah.
When I was young, it was something I just took for granted because we lived in LA and we came back and forth pretty easily. Also in that time, the border was different, right? It was so much more fluid. It wasn't such a dramatic thing to cross. It was so easy. And then when we left when we got to Tennessee and money was tight, we missed things like weddings and like I was young, but still quinceañeras. I did miss a few quinces. We just didn't have the money to fly. But we did go back every once. Like there was a period where in like 7 years we only went back twice, and that was probably the period where I felt most distant from my community. But it was still like always there, and it was also kind of tied in with my relationship with the language, with Spanish, because what's weird about my linguistic upbringing is Spanish was my first language as a baby. But then my father, going through the stress of his chosen work, just decided one day that he wasn't comfortable with me speaking Spanish until I was older. And my mom at the time, I think, was just caught in between two worlds and said, okay, and so there was a period where like suddenly everything just changed linguistically. Right. And I was really little. And I remember I started off with saying te quiero, and then it turned to, I would never say I love you. I was like a very rebellious little kid at that point. I would always say, I think I love you. And I think it's because I was like, why is this changing all of a sudden? And then my mom changed her mind and realized like, oh no, I want to keep Spanish in the house. But by then we were in Tennessee. And so it got very Spanglishy for me because, my mom, also I was rebelling because I was like, I was already being bullied for being different. I didn't want to be any more different. And, it was a new place, just trying to find my groove. But my mom would insist. So she would speak to me in Spanish at times. And of course I understood and I picked up more. But that was also very tied into my relationship with Mexico, because to me, I was kind of just not able to come to terms with all these big changes in my life. It was very confusing. And then when my sister came to live with us, I was like, oh crap, I gotta rustle up all my Spanish because she doesn't speak any. So then my relationship to my community changed again. And also that was, by that time we were in Knoxville and there was more diversity. So I stopped being bullied. And so when I stopped being bullied, that was when I was more embracing of my community.
And I always ask people like high school years, like who were you pretending to be, and how did other people see you?
Oh, I was very much I was a lone wolf, because it was a new change for me again, going from like this very small town mentality to Knoxville, which has a very vibrant arts culture and is much more diverse than Piney Flats.
It sounds like a made up town. So what's that?
Oh, it's right next to Boone's Creek, which also sounds like a made up town.
That's funny.
I know. These places exist. But yeah, so once high school started with Knoxville, Tennessee, and like those big changes in my life, my sister coming, and so, but I was still in this very like defensive mentality because I didn't know that people were going to be nicer here. I didn't realize that with diversity was going to mean less bullying. Because people weren't making me feel like I was a freak. So it got so much better. And so I began to be more, I was very much in the arts. Did a lot of theater. I did a lot of drawing, like creative writing, things like that in high school. I was still a very guarded person at that age, but I was also really happy with the changes in my life that were certainly more positive.
And you mentioned that you were bullied, like what was the source of that? Not like psychologically, but like what were they bullying you for?
Gosh, I actually don't even know. Just for being weird. They always just said you're weird, and I'm like, am I? This is the first I'm hearing of this.
Yeah.
And maybe I am, but I'm like, and Ike,
Yeah.
you know, like.
But I'm sure also coming from LA, like you probably were different.
My accent was different.
Yeah.
Again, like when I first went there, I couldn't understand what people were saying.
Yeah.
You know, and I think maybe they thought I was being superior, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was honest. Like I do not understand what taters are.
Yeah.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, taters are potatoes.
Okay. I somewhat knew that. I knew they're potato forms.
Yeah. But like I remember it was really bad. Like once this girl, Vicky, and to this day, whenever I meet somebody named Vicky, I suddenly feel on alert. I'm just like, what do you want? You know, because like I remember it climaxed to the point where like the school really got involved, where Vicky was throwing dirty tampons at me. Oh, wow. It was bad. Yeah.
See, that's why we need anti-bullying campaigns.
We do. We really do.
And, you know, and I'm not trying to give credit to my brother, but he made a note that it's like, and, you know, I think also as like Latinx folk and talking about like the industry and the struggle and the artistry of it, we like, and I just saw this on like a rerun of Oprah. I sometimes watch it on YouTube, but they were saying how we bond over trauma. And like as like Latinx folks, as like people doing work and blah 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 blah. So I also want to try to shift that a little bit into like anybody, and just to like you growing up, like what were the joy of it? Like what was the joyfulness of it? What was like the stuff that you still remember that you're like, oh, wasn't that great? Like
I was always, I think, gifted at playing, and the people who made room for that were like I had very close relationships with a couple girls. My best friend Diamond, who lived in Florida, and her family would like arrange for her to come visit me, or for me to go visit her. Yeah. And we were just really good at playing. We made our own worlds. We made our own games. We made our own rules. I think because I didn't have like a whole clique of people to tell me like what to do and not to do. When I had like a relationship with I was very like a one person type of friend, you know, like one person at a time. Yeah. And so we would kind of just invent our own rules, and that was a source of joy. We would pretend to be mermaids in the pool or in the lake, you know, because we just invented our own things, and that was inventing was always a source of joy. Yeah.
That's cool. And then like in high school, like sort of like when you're wrapping that up, it's coming to it. Did you have any idea what you wanted to do after? Like, was there a plan, and did you like do the plan? Right.
Well, two things there. My youngest brother, Craig, is autistic, and I was very active in his therapy. He had a lot of therapy, so I thought maybe I'll be a therapist for autistic kids. But also I had a learning disability with math. It was like a mathematics, and it was very severe. So I was very good at the humanities. I've always been like when I got, they had to test me because my grades were so weird, right? Like failing on my math classes, but not struggling at all when it came to language or humanities, because I read a lot. But I didn't think I was going to graduate high school because I was pretty sure I had flunked my math class, and I had retaken it. It was like my third time taking it. Oh, wow. And so I had kind of had this period where I was like, maybe I just won't go to college. I don't, you know, I just thought maybe I'm not smart enough. And I mean, I am very smart. Like my reading levels were off the charts. Like when they tested me in middle school, I had a collegiate reading level in middle school. I was interpreting, they asked me to interpret the Constitution, and I was like, yeah, I got this. But math, I felt so helpless, and I just like, I'm too stupid. I just won't go to college. Yeah. And my mom like recognized that, because she had like, she was able to relate in some ways, because she wasn't prepared for college when she first started it. And so my mom really pushed me to go to college. And at that time she was still working on her, I think she was finishing her master's at that time. Because we ended up graduating at the same time, me with my undergrad and her with her PhD, and we had like this joint party. It was like it was really awesome. It was a really awesome celebration, because like all my family from like California came out, and Phoenix as well. But yeah. So at first I was like, when my mom got me into school, even though my grades weren't really good enough. But then once I got into college, I made really good grades. Like because suddenly I realized I don't have to take math.
Yeah.
And the stress of realizing I don't have to take a single math class ever again.
Yeah.
Suddenly I flourished, you know, because I was like, everything I study is up to me.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about college. So I suddenly became very academic, and it kind of just came out of nowhere. And certainly my teachers, I don't think expected that. I started to go towards theater and literature, even though I had set out to do like cognitive child psychology. But then I realized like I just couldn't ignore my joy, and that my joy was storytelling. And I for a while I couldn't decide between theater and literature, but then I was like, well, I don't have to choose. I can do both. And so that's where that's what I got my degree in, before I went and got my master's in Seattle.
I want to know like where like the root of like your even passion for theater came into, just because, you know, you said you were sort of struggling. Like where did you like even have the thought that it's like, oh, this is something I want to pursue? Yeah.
Oh, that's a piece I've left out. So my mom, when we lived in LA, my mom was always taking me to auditions. I was like a child actor in LA when we were here. So I had an agent and everything.
Cool.
Yeah. So it was from the beginning, I was kind of brought up in that. And then when we lived in the smaller towns, like the community college we lived in, I did a few plays there. I remember this one glorious moment where this one girl who was bullying me and I were both up for the same part. And it was like, you know, there are not that many parts for kids, you know, because it's not like a theater town. It's a very small place. And I got the role and she didn't. And I was like, you know, and then she was like, you only got the role because you're short. And I was like, well, I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this.
You can curse.
Okay. Well, you know what I said.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I always sought it out, because it was like the one, like the interesting thing about theater is like the same rules tend to apply, right? No matter where you are. Art is art, no matter where you are. So I found that that was something I could always kind of put my energy into and not feel like such an outsider or like such a weirdo. You know, I think when I was uprooted from my community became something that I was either guarding myself from or seeking out. And so that's why one of the reasons why I think I was always drawn to theater was just because that was a community that I could feel like I belonged to. Kind of like how New York City is a place where all transplants say they're from, you know, because it's an accepting city, and theater is like an accepting discipline.
Yeah, no, I've just recently this year gotten more into theater. Never was really into theater, but that's one of the things I sort of like love about it. Always sort of knew about it, the community aspect of it, but to me it felt very cliquey, very like them. But then like once I was like sort of like in it, I was like, oh, this is like cool. Like because then you just meet so many people through it. Like people are into different things and sort of everybody knows each other, and it's like this whole community that like that it's like really is like anybody can just tap into, but that's like the secret sauce of the theater. And then in high school when I was in Knoxville, I didn't know anybody, so I just started doing these theater competitions, and it was a way where I could like kind of have socialization, but like on my terms, right? Because I hadn't at that time felt comfortable yet with groups of people. But I could be working on my craft, like at home, preparing for the competition, and then like just be sort of having camaraderie with other people who were doing the same thing. And that was kind of how I was able to sort of feel more comfortable with larger group settings. Yeah. And did you do your master's right after your...
no.
What did you do in between?
No, I went to New York City and I did the whole professional actor hustle.
Got it.
And that was eye-opening for me as a Latina, because my undergrad, I didn't have any chances to really... Well, no, like... Aside from Marquez, no one had introduced me to literature of my people. And I remember asking, like, even my theater professors, I was asking, like, so if I wanted to do something that was Latin American, who should I look up? Who should I look for? And sometimes people would say, like, oh, Jose Rivera, you know, but they would give me nothing else. And I'm like, well, there's got to be more than Jose Rivera. I mean, Jose Rivera is amazing. I love his work. It's beautiful work. But the great thing about New York City is I got to see that there's theater of like my people in my community. And that was just something my soul had been aching for so long, living in Tennessee. And they had community. Like, I love the Latino theater community. It's kind of what I had always been looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long were you in New York?
4 years.
4 years. And like, how would you describe that experience of, first of all, living in New York and like being like a working actor, trying to like do the hustle of it?
Oh, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was very hard. I remember once I was doing my first independent film and I wasn't getting paid for it. And I was bartending in order to pay my rent. And I had to go 3 days without sleep because I had to work at night and then film during the day. And this is why we need unions too, because at one point they wanted, or no, I think I can't remember, it was 2.5 or 3 days without sleep, but they wanted one more day. And I was like, I can't, I have to go home and sleep. I have to work because I need to pay my rent, and I need to sleep. We need to reschedule when we're grabbing that scene. And my director was so mad, but I was like, can you not understand? Like, I have to eat, I have to pay rent, and I also need to sleep. Yeah. You know, like, hashtag unions.
Yeah. And what did you do after New York?
Graduate school at the University of Washington. I got my master's in acting, and that's actually where I took my first screenwriting course, and also where I took my first Latin American lit course, because I was able to take it in the summer. There was no time to take anything outside of your program when you're in that program. It is like 12 to 15 hours a day when you're in rehearsals. Oh yeah, right. It's a lot. Yeah. But over the summer, I was like, this is my last chance to really get like a collegiate level introduction to the literature of my people, and also to learn about screenwriting, because I was like, I feel like this is calling me, and so I did. It was hard because the whole class, the literature class, was in Spanish, and I had to look up a lot of words. Yeah. It was like I was only taking like 2 courses, but I felt like I was taking a full-time load. That's intense. It's really intense. There's a lot of words to look up. Yeah. But it was so good for me. I'm so glad I did that. Yeah. Yeah.
And is this like, you know, connecting it back to your family, like what were were they supportive? What were they
so supportive?
In all this? Yeah.
I remember my first year of grad school, I was feeling very dejected and very burnt out. And I made this decision. I was like, Mom, I want to, I was also broke, right? And I was like, Mom, I want to spend the summer in Mexico. And I remembered a family member had offered, like, you can always come stay with us in Mexico City. So I was like, I'm going to take them up on that. And it was everything I needed. I remember it gave me the fuel I needed to continue my master's studies, because it was very difficult. They put you through the ringer in those programs. And I spent the summer in San Lucas Holux, and it was so good. I just to not think about theater and just to feel the support and love of family, and to live a summer without rent and free food, nice. Free food, no rent. Yeah. And to just be around like people who know you, and honor you.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Because it's like every time I go back to like Mexico City, I'm always like, I'm home. Like like people are talking to you in Spanish, like and sure, like I have family there, but it's also like a store clerk will like say like aquí está mijo, and I'm like like I'm just like we're all like family, like these are my people, like, and it's just like, again, it's like you're trying to like connect back to your community, and and then when you're at the source of it, it's like the best.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of comedy there. I've got to dig into one day, because you know, when you're the American, like, cousin, so much. I remember I rescued this dog off the street because I always have so much sympathy for the street dogs of Mexico. Like they get at my heart, and I rescued this one, and my tia agreed to keep her. And I was like, oh, thank you,
Very
tia.
nice of her.
So nice of her. And she still has her. And she was like, what do you want to name her? And I was like, Sor Juana. And she was like, what? And I was like, Sor Juana, because, you know, I want to name her after a great, wonderful, powerful Mexican icon. And my tia was like, órale, okay. She is Sor Juana.
And, you know, you sort of mentioned that you got it into, like, you know, writing for the first time really at grad school. Like, is that something that, like, was always there? Like, were you always
yes,
like, Like, what was like the thread line for that growing up and like just in general in your career?
Well, when I lived in East Tennessee, I wrote a lot of poems. I wrote a lot of sad, melancholy poems, right? About being alone. And so I always wrote, but yeah, I realized, and I think it was also because being in New York City before grad school, I saw the Latino theater community really inspired me because I saw it was possible.
Yeah.
Right? I saw that my voice had a place. And so I kind of just let that marinate for, and also I took this, right before I started grad school, I did this intensive with the Labyrinth Theater Company of New York City. And it's a very like well-known intensive. And what they didn't tell us was that one of the playwrights I look up to so much, Stephen Adly Gurgis, was teaching our writing class.
Yeah.
This was right before grad school. And like, they didn't tell us that. And then they like announced it as he came into like the lobby of where we were staying. And he was like, oh, and this is Stephen Adly Gurgis, who will be teaching your writing class. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
You know? And so he also really inspired me because the class he taught was like crazy. Like it was just so raw the way he was teaching. And I mean, I was just like, oh my God, what is he doing? This is amazing.
Yeah.
And he used to say, write about what keeps you up at night, you know? And all his prompts were kind of geared towards that. And so that was kind of like right before grad school, I had that like kind of just in my system, you know, as I'm entering the program. So that was kind of marinating while I was working on my acting masters. And I was like, yeah, I need to do that. I need to write about what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, that's such a good like way to put it.
Yeah.
Because it's also like so many feelings are involved in that, and just being like, what does keep me up at night? It's like fear, anxiety, like hope, like planning, like and it's also like the very like what you're thinking of in that moment. It's like very true to who you are, and like like just like the stuff where it's because it's like at its best, writing is very much just the truth, and you trying to express that truth of like yourself or like something that's like within you. Yeah, that's a good prompt. I might like actually use it.
Well, all his prompts were really geared towards that, where he would tell us something like write a letter to someone who you have like an unresolved beef with that you really need to resolve, like today if you could. And then he would be like, now write what they write back to you. Okay, now write your response. And then he did this tricky little thing where the last prompt of the class, he was like, okay, now this one we're not going to share. We're not going to read out loud. This one's just for you. And he gave the prompt, and then like I like went to town. I was like writing it down. And then he was like, when we were done, he was like, just kidding. We're all sharing. We're not leaving this room until everyone shares. And I was like, what?
Oh my God. That just gave me like, I just got nervous thinking about that.
Oh yeah. His class was like the Wild
That's
West.
good though. Cause it's like, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. So like, it's good to like push writers.
It really pushed my boundaries, and it stayed with me. Like, and I'm like, as I'm working on my acting degree, I kept thinking about what I want to write right. If like I've had the day free right now, I would write this because this is what's keeping me up right now.
Yeah, and it also speaks to just like the thing that is like like you don't want to share with anybody is like such a great thing to like write about. Yeah, and only because like once it's read by someone else or like performed, some other person will be like, oh, I do that too. Like that's exactly like. And this thing that you're holding that you think that no one else is dealing with it. It's your own private thing that you like die with or like go to your grave.
Or things you don't really want to own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're private.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, for sure. And it pushes your sort of how you're looking at what's on your mind. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very vulnerable.
Yes.
But it's like, that's where the good stuff is. And so what did you do after like you wrapped up in Seattle?
Well, I moved to LA and I started my work as a professional actor. And there was a dark time in my life. I was experiencing some things that a lot of women are familiar with. But the good thing about that period of my life was that I felt like I needed a voice. And so where I had been sort of procrastinating, really setting my thoughts to paper, I suddenly couldn't procrastinate anymore because I needed it. I felt like I had no voice, and it was the one thing that I just needed. And so I started really hunkering down and really pushing myself as a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, you're in LA, you're now like finding this new voice in your writing. When was like the first time that it was like being read or performed or even like shared?
So I wrote a short called La Sirena, and I decided that I was going to produce it. Again, I didn't really have any networking. I didn't have any resources really. So I started a Kickstarter campaign. I raised the majority of the funds I needed. I also just lived on rice, beans, and chilaquiles for like often, because you can't do it every month. It starts to really drain on you.
Yeah.
But I saved a lot of money just not going out. And even the funny thing is I have a little chihuahua. And because we ate chilaquiles so much, my dog refuses to eat chilaquiles. Like, I tried to give her some a month ago, and she looked at the bowl, and I could read her mind. She was like, no, never again.
But you're the dog sick of it.
Yeah, no, she reminded me of Scarlett O'Hara, in Gone with the Wind, where she pulls out the radish from the dirt and says, I will never be hungry again. My dog Dorrit was like, I will never eat chilaquiles again.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So how long has it been since you moved back to LA?
About 3 years.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And how did you make a home here again, or have you?
Yeah, I think I am. I've got great roommates. We get along pretty well. My best friend, luck had it, moved out to LA at the same time as me. And she was a friend from New York City. And so I had more community in LA than I was used to having like at other times in my life, because also my family's here.
Yeah.
So my tios always say, like, we're just down Whittier, like
it's good that you have family. Like, I like to ask about the first 2 years, just because at any point you can move back, or it could just not go your way when you move to LA. So I always like to just for the people that are thinking of moving here or have just moved here, who are don't know what to do, they're barely just figuring it out, trying to get their footing. How would you describe those first 2 years?
Dark. Yeah, but it's okay, because we people, we are we're like phoenixes. You have to kind of burn down to some ashes so that you can be reborn, and that's life cycles.
Yeah.
And I would say, and for some people it might not be that bad. For some people it's probably easy, but for me it was tough. But it also really shaped me in the way, I'm a very spiritual person. My mom's an ex-Catholic atheist, but I'm very spiritual, and for me, I would pray, God, make me this. This is who I want to be. Make me who, the person I want to be, which is a better version of myself. And I think sometimes God answers that prayer by giving you hardship, and it's kind of weird, because you always say, God, don't give me hardship. But then you're also like, oh, Lord, make me, this and that. And so that's how I think that was really important in my life to have just the strength and community to help me through that time. But it was also a time of discovery.
Yeah.
I found this theater company that I started working with. I'm a company member of Teatro Luna.
Love them.
Yeah, they're great. They introduced me to this idea of the female gaze. And it was a time in my life when I was really ready. I was ready to unpack how much I had internalized in different aspects of my life.
Yeah.
And, growing up in the South, so much I had internalized. And it was just a wealth of discovery and, these communities with whom I could really explore what is life through authentically my gaze.
Yeah.
Stripping away the influences that aren't serving me.
Yeah, because it's for so many things, in our identities, there's stuff we do have to unlearn.
Yeah.
That aren't serving us, are truly, we're just and we don't want to be constantly just putting that same stuff back.
Yeah.
I love Teatro Luna. I think they're doing incredible work.
They do. Yeah.
They just hosted our last event in November. And sort of what have you been doing with them?
Well, we worked on the times together. That was great. But also we do a lot of writing prompts, and a lot of times I take some of those writing prompts home, and they influence what I'm writing at home. I think it was very helpful for me to hear like the things that are marinating in the room, because that was a big influence on my film La Sirena, where I was really challenging myself to really excavate like a lot of things, healing, trauma, traumas that's specifically geared towards, well, actually no, they're geared towards everybody, but disproportionately women experience a lot more than men or male identifying people. But also Latinidad, like different sides of this cultural coin of Mexican American. Like I have these two characters. Sirena is like me, she's half white, half Latina, and then Marco is like from Mexico, and like and the cultural exchange was interesting to me, you know, because I think there's a lot that comes out about the nuances of how diverse our culture is.
Absolutely.
Even just within Mexican American communities, there's such a huge spectrum, and Hollywood paints us all as like one thing. And so I created these characters as a way to sort of investigate like some of the you don't have a lot of time with a short film because it's a 13-minute film, but as much as I could excavate in 13 minutes, I tried to kind of pack into that film.
And I guess speaks to those stuff that we have to unlearn about, like because you know, it's like I totally agree with you. Like our Latinidad, our identity, how we see ourselves, how we perform that, how we express it, is different to because we're all different people. And I think we sort of, and you know, I think the media does this when they paint us in 4 different ways, and if you're not that, then you're doing it wrong. We internalize a lot of that.
Oh, I know, because I was going to collaborate with some people who it didn't work out and I didn't collaborate with, but like they would bring ideas of like what they thought was Latinidad. And that was when I realized I have to work with LatinX people on this project. Because I was like, well, you know, if as long as they're really woke, it should work out. And then I was like, no, it's got to be a Latinx person.
Yeah, because it's like who, you know, for things that are being made and put out, it's like who's telling our stories. Like a lot of times we're not telling our own stories, and that influences further stories that will be told later. So it really has to be for us, by us.
Yes, for sure. And I learned that here in LA. I realized that when a potential collaborator was offering ideas, and I was kind of shocked at some of the ideas. I was like, no, that's not. And and that's when I really realized how important it is that we are making our own things, because people just don't know what they don't know. And it's not like any fault or like to demonize or like not at all.
It's like what they know is based on like some other concept that we were never even a part of. So
yes, exactly.
And it's also to like when you collaborate with more Latinx people, like you could have 5 people in a room collaborating. That doesn't mean they all agree like this is exactly how it's supposed to be. It's like, no, well, my experience is this. And so it complicates, it expands the definition. And, and, you know, we all like, with any audience, it'll be like, identify with that just because the story works and like the characters. And with other people, it can be like, oh no, like that's exactly like me. Or like somebody I know. And like, so it still resonates with an audience. But I did have the chance to see La Sirena, and immediately I was like, just because of the subject, the story, and that you also acted in it, I was like, I need to talk to this person. So can you just like just tell the people what it's about and like the process of like
so La Sirena is about an exotic dancer who is working through sexual trauma. And on a night where she's working at the club, the person who assaulted her comes in. But he comes in with an acquaintance of his, Marco, who doesn't know that this is what had occurred. And so she immediately leans into Marco because, you know, as a means to keep the assailant at bay. And they they get lost in translation. These two people, they understand each other, but then at the same time, there's also just so much room for misunderstanding each other. And I think that's something that's just really interesting to look at in human relationships: the places where we connect, and then the places where things just get lost. through no fault of anybody's
No.
own, but just because of the world we live in and the narratives that exist between us. I purposefully played with narrative reliability because, and this was just before the Me Too movement happened, but I really wanted to, to play with how we look at a person and decide whether they are reliable or not.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why, I mean, there were a lot of reasons why I chose to place the setting in exotic dance, but I felt like that was a means to play with narrative reliability and also a means to really look at, like in a fishbowl kind of setting, sexual politics in the United States. And yeah, I don't want to give it away, but yeah, I think it's a story of, I always say it's a siren's ballad of trauma and healing.
Yeah. And it's amazing, beautifully shot.
Thank you.
And you mentioned that you're like an aerialist. I see it on your Instagram. I'm always like the core strength, the like muscles, the bravery to even like do that. How did you get into that?
Well, I was dealing with trauma actually, and I needed a distraction. I needed something that was like the thing I love about aerial, and also the thing that terrifies me is it requires so much concentration of not just all of your mind but all of your body, and it really requires it because you're doing things where you could, in theory, you could touch wood, you could die. So obviously people who teach the class, they teach in a very safe way. They tend to keep you like where your level is, so it was a means for me for healing. It was also like in a time where I was still like finding my place in LA, and you don't need anyone to do aerial really. Like, you can, especially when there's open gym, you can just go and you perform for the other people in the class, and so there was that component. And I loved it because it's really hard, it's really beautiful, and I can't think of anything else when I'm doing it. It takes all of you. And I really needed at that time like a break from myself, a break from my own troubles. And aerial gave me that. Yeah.
It's very cool. Every time I see it on my feed, I'm like, this is so cool.
Thank you.
And because I saw the film, I was like the skill.
Yeah, I do my own stunts.
Yeah. And then when I saw I think you mentioned it like when they were doing like the Q&A, and I was like, this is so interesting. Like, yeah, it's very cool. And I did want to ask about, this web series that I've seen that you're developing, like, if you could tell us about it.
Yeah, so the next thing, we just shot it, and it's the thing I'm working on right now, is called Friends in High Places. It's a Latina stoner comedy. It's pot versus the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And my co-star is Maya Milan Gonzalez, who is also an amazing Latina writer, actor, art creator she lives in Los Angeles. We just finished shooting it. We haven't started editing yet, but we're going to start soon, and it's going to be really funny. We shot it bilingually. When I made the Kickstarter campaign and such, I didn't advertise it as a bilingual production because I knew our budget was going to be so tight. I was like, well, what if we don't have the time to shoot the scenes that would be bilingual?
Got it, yeah.
So the whole thing is, we have two versions of it. One that's just English, and then one that's bilingual, but not all the scenes are in Spanish. It's because I feel like these two Latinas wouldn't be speaking to each other in Spanish, but they would speak to their neighbor in Spanish who just came from Panama, right? Like they would speak to her in Spanish. But yeah, so we're going to have a version of it that's going to be like kind of just two versions, and it's going to be we actually shot all the bilingual scenes that I had hoped we could shoot, which was, we were on a really tight schedule, and there was times where I was like, I don't know if we're gonna make it, but we did, and so it was like just such a moment of like victory. It was like, yes, we did it.
And where'd like the inspiration come to like do a web series to like make this subject?
Oh gosh, that is actually, I haven't even told this story really. Well, I started with making a short film called Holes that that was supposed to be sort of my a very autobiographical rumination on an experience that I had when I first came to LA, dealing with my university in a way that was very heartbreaking and problematic because I was they had basically, I had reported a sexual assault, and the appeal board overturned it, and that was, and the reasons they gave me for overturning it were, I mean, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was so shocked at the reasons, and they write it down and they send it to you in this document. And I was like, I can't believe somebody actually wrote that down. Like that is appalling.
Yeah.
And so I was still like just needing to work that out. But I remember I was dealing with that this one day. It was just, I had an air mattress because I had thrown my old mattress away, and I had thrown my mattress away because I was moving from Seattle to LA, and I was like, that mattress was the mattress I was assaulted on. And I was like, fuck that mattress. I am throwing it in the garbage. It is not going to make it into my U-Haul. There are other things I want to put in that U-Haul besides that bean shade mattress.
Yeah.
So I'm in LA, I have an air mattress, and there's holes in it. And I'm getting these emails from the people that I'm corresponding with in regards to this case. And I'm trying to plug up the holes in my mattress. And I remember I was listening to classical music at the time to try to like calm myself down. And suddenly I was getting like, I was freaking out because I could not fix my stupid air mattress. I could not get the damn thing to keep air. And I was like about to scream. And then suddenly I just stopped and I looked at myself like how a fly on the wall would see me. And I was like, this is funny. This is ridiculous. And this is funny. And off of that, I made this little short holes. But then I realized, no, this short doesn't want to be, as we were making it, I realized, oh, it doesn't want to be a short. This wants to be a web series, and it wants to be a comedy, and it wants to be even funnier than I made it before. Like, it was funny, but like, I was like, it wants to be even funnier. So then we went back to that material and sort of morphed it into the pilot for this web series.
Got it. You know, because it's all like the journey to the like the product. It's like, it's always interesting to me because it's like there are times where you will have like just a scenario in your life, and then from that you could be like, you know, this is like a bad idea for something. Like, it's like truly making your art. And you know, you sort of mentioned to me how it's like theater sort of fed into like your filmmaking.
Yes.
So yeah, if you just wanted to talk about that, like what was that?
Yeah. You know, I find that sometimes people in LA are hesitant to, some people love like that I do theater, and some people are kind of like, well, does that, you know, influence you in a way that's not very cinematic, you know? And I my viewpoint to cinema is that cinema is theater merged with photography, right? So everything that it takes to make like a good play, which I had been around theater, you know, since I was really little, so I understood theater, and it served me in jumping from theater to cinema because I realized, you know, the only thing you have to change is making it like I kind of think of a scene, and then as I'm writing it, I kind of imagine, well, if this scene were to be encapsulated in a picture, in one still photograph, what would that photograph look like? Where would it be? What would be in the background? And then so I take that and that's my setting. And so because film is really just about more settings, settings that speak to the theme of what's going on in the scene. And so that's kind of what I do. I think very theatrically, but then I mold it to cinema by just imagining I was going to tell this whole story with like an art gallery exhibition of a photographer's work, right? And if a photographer were dealing with all these themes and all these ideas, what would they be taking pictures of? And that's kind of like my process for writing for the film.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
because so many people would just be like, oh, there's no difference. Let me just like, but with like, you know, they always say like show, don't tell. And like, and you can't beat like a good like shot where it's like tells you everything you need to know in that moment. No dialogue needed to be spoken. And you know, so much about that person. Like if you were just to shoot like what's on their table, and it's like, well, we know this about them. We know this about them. We know that. Or like, how is like, it's important. Yeah, for sure. And I think a goal, like for anyone who's like kind of like me and has like a lot of theater background and wants to start working in writing for film, I would say like make your DP happy. And your DP is the director of photography. And
my director of photography is Marisela Mendez, and she's a genius. She's an amazing Latina DP. And, whenever I'm writing, I always think, like, where would I set this? Where Marisela would be like, ooh, yeah, I want to shoot that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, is there like a through line through your writing? Like, are there themes? Is it, sometimes as writers we're telling the same story but just in different ways. So like, if you could connect like all the storytelling that you're passionate about that excites you, what would they be about?
It would be about changing narratives. I think especially for me, because I think especially like being in the South makes you see what's missing, because the only thing people in the South have to go on when it comes to like Latinidad is what they see in film and TV.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of like the things people would say that would just make me complain later, I realized they're saying these things because that's all they see and that's all they know. And I want to change that. I also want to give like a little girl version of me what I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I've never actually seen myself represented in a film, because the closest thing I've seen, and it made me so excited, it was just recently, really, Philippa Sue, Olivia Munn, and that actress from Orange Is the New Black. Her name begins with a K, but I forgot her name, because they're mixed race, right? And but they're all Asian, and I would love to see an emergence of mixed race Latinas, right? It's missing, and I realized that's why I think people had a lot of kind of negative assumptions about me and my family in the South, right? They just don't understand how to see us, and I didn't understand how to see myself for the longest time, because I didn't have like a film TV narrative to go off of. And so I kind of had to find that narrative like on my own. And now like the things I've found, I really am very passionate about sharing. Like, what is it to be a US Latina? What is it to be US Latina mixed race? What is it to be, even a woman in this country who is of color and dealing with all the things in this moment?
Yeah.
And an artist, an innovator. I have a feature I wrote that I'm applying for grants for. That is about a Latina filmmaker, and that innovates. Like, she works in very non-narrative forms, experimental film, and about how our community makes so much room for men to innovate, but if a woman innovates, it's because she doesn't understand the form.
Yeah.
There's always an assumption as a woman, even if you're trying to innovate, like, and I've experienced it, even if you're trying to make the smallest innovation, like an innovation of like, I want to make this very centered around a female gaze and not a male gaze. There's always so much distrust, right, of the innovations I want to make. And it's because there's always an assumption that if you're innovating as a woman, that you're innovating because you don't know the rules. It's like, no, I know the rules. I know what's expected.
Yeah.
I'm doing something different on purpose. I think men artists have a hard enough time innovating as it is, but it gets through because they're men. And because we make room for that, but we don't make room for that for women. I haven't seen it, and I would love to see it. Yeah.
And, I think a great, like a main reason why I even started this podcast was because, it was just reading articles, doing research, listening to interviews, where I very quickly realized, like, first of all, we don't have that many of our stories out there, and the ones we do are very limited.
Yeah.
But we're not even telling those stories.
Yeah.
And it's like, it speaks to the larger moment of our country at this time, where it's like how people view Latinx folk is very important. And the fact that we're not part of that conversation, we're not making it, is detrimental to us in general, in our lives, walking on the street, like, and that, because it's like most people only know people similar to them. Most white people only know other white people. And if the only exposure they're getting to Latinx people is through the media, where we're, cartels and drug dealers and living in poverty, or through a Trump rally,
right?
It's like that informs how we're being.
Even cartel narratives.
Yeah.
I lost a family member to cartel violence. It's actually the reason I've seen a couple, but I pretty much never watch a show about that, only because I don't want to be disappointed and see a misrepresentation of what that really is.
Yeah.
Because when you have a family member who went in that path, you see it in a different light because you know that person.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very good man, and he was a very generous man. In fact, he was so generous that, he died in a shootout with the Mexican police in Mexico. And, but even though he had made a very, very good income, he died poor because he always gave his money away, because he hated to see people live without.
Yeah.
And he was very much, I'm not saying that everything he did was okay, but I'm saying he was very much like a Robin Hood kind of character in our families, in the way we still honor and miss him.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, even that is like so misrepresented.
Yeah.
They're shown as thugs, and it's like, no, these are people who, violence is not to be condoned, but people get pushed there. And I feel like I see a big difference in the way people write stories about, like, for instance, Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Versus, like, we see Walter White, that's the character's name,
Yeah.
right? Walter White, he is like, we're on his side because we
Yeah.
see how he got to where he got.
Yeah.
I don't see that when they portray Narcos.
No.
And I think that's really important. Like, what could be more important than that? If it's the humanness, like, where's the humanness of these people that we see in, like, Walter White?
Yeah, because it's like, cartel narratives, like gang narratives for Latinx folk, like, that's fine to do, but like, make them a whole person. Like,
Yes.
that's what I was talking with my previous guest. It's like, make them a person that is actually, like, has a family, and like, the decisions they're making. But like, when we're just the bad guy, and like, what was that film that just came out with like Sylvester Stallone, where it's like the narrative of like Mexicans coming into our country, they're one-dimensional characters that are coming, and he like has to kill them to save America.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, no, that's bullshit.
yeah, and it's like, well, why do you think like people are being shot at Walmarts and kids are in cages? Because we're not being seen as human.
Yeah.
And there's also that divide between like Mexican American and then like Mexicans living in Mexico, and of like they're seen as invaders, and then like it's all like detrimental to us as people, and unless we're part of that narrative and can like actually tell true stories and accurate depictions, and we got a lot of work to do.
Well, even in my family, this person, he was actually born in America. He was American, but he was tired of being poor.
Yeah.
He was done with poverty. He's like, I'm not going to keep doing this.
Yeah. And like, that's a complicated story. Like, I want to see that story.
Yeah.
Like, but that's not like, that doesn't fit in with the cookie cutter narrative of like, how can we turn out things that people are familiar with and like, they've seen before, because that's half of what the media is.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask about the writers that you admire, like they can be Latinx, of like heroes of yours, peers of yours, like friends of yours, people that you were like Instagram stalking, that you're like, I love what they're doing. I don't know, they don't know me, I don't know them, but I see them from afar and they're doing great. So yeah.
Well, I'm lucky enough to kind of know some of the people I stalk on Instagram. Lucky in that regard. Yeah. And, I think that one of the great things about social media, I mean, we love to just talk about, social media, it sucks. But, it's also very inspiring to me because you can see like the slow and yet rewarding path of people who are blazing the trail.
Yeah.
Right. And you can see them like kind of just whenever, like daily things. I was lucky to work this year with Diana Borbano. Cool. She's a playwright, and we were working on American Mariachi at Arizona Theater Company this year, and she did like a very like informal like reading of like her work in our artist housing. And I got to be more familiar with her as a writer as well. And I'm like, wow, like and it was just a draft. Like it wasn't even the finished product. And it was just a draft. And I was just like, wow, this is really good. This is really awesome. Like her voice, and she innovates, you know, like her writing style has a very like unbound, imaginative, sort of innovative approach that I'm just like, yes, this is what I've been looking for. Yeah. So definitely very inspired by Diana Borbano. I also like to Facebook stalk Alex Beach, and she knows this because I like almost everything she posts. Like it's probably obnoxious at times. Yeah. Let's see. I'm very proud of the work that Bernardo Cubria is doing. I did a show with him in New York City. It was like a Pearl Jam Hamlet kind of show in the park. Cool. Yeah, it was kind of like Pearl Jam's album 10 meets Hamlet. We used to call it Jamlet, like lovingly Jamlet, which is actually written by Mando Alvarado. And so Bernardo, I saw a play of his not too long ago. It was very funny. It was really good. It was out in Santa Monica. The name of the play eludes me, but if you look him up, you'll find his work. I think Luna is doing amazing work in Boyle Heights. My partner in crime for my stoner comedy, Maya Malan Gonzalez, has a play right now I think it's in 3 theaters right now. It was called Christmas Cuento Remix. And I've heard great things about that show. I haven't been able to see it because it's not in LA and I can't afford a plane ticket. Sorry, Maya. I just don't have the money. But if I did, I would go up to Portland or Cleveland and see it. I'm also very inspired by the work of Kaiden Phoenix. Kaiden Phoenix started a organization called the Chicana Directors Initiative.
Oh yeah, I've seen a little about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know she's got this piece she's working on called Jalisco, which is like just bomb awesome. I love what she makes as a filmmaker and as a writer and director. So she's definitely someone to check out, and someone who, like, you know, when I'm starting to kind of drag my feet as an artist, her Instagram will pop up and I'll be like, okay, come on, like, keep up, you know. I was very inspired by poetry. Poetry is very inspiring to me. It was actually part of my inspiration for La Sirena, was a poem by an Uruguayan poet called Mario Benedetti, called Sirena. I actually have it on me. I could read it.
You can if you want.
Okay, let me pull it up.
Yeah, and that makes sense because the film felt very poetic.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I kind of did a lot of work with this poem, and this actually was a big part of my growth in terms of language has always been a thing for me where I want more of it. I've always yearned for more. It's been a big part of what nabs my soul as a person. So I remember especially when I took that Latin American lit class in grad school, and I really had to put my Spanish up to the next level, in order to be able to do well in that class. It was so good for me because there is nothing like being able to understand poetry, especially in a language that you were born with but then estranged from, is very cathartic. And I think that was why I sought this out and found it, and was a huge influence in my first film. So this is Sirena by Mario Benedetti. It's Tengo la convicción de que no existes, y sin embargo te oigo cada noche. Te invento a veces con mi vanidad, o mi desolación, o mi modorra del infinito mar viene su asombro, y lo escucho como un salmo, y pese a todo, tan convencido estoy de que no existes, que te aguardo en mi sueño para luego.
Snaps to that.
Snaps, right? Wasn't that? So I found that poem and I was like, ooh, this is part of my film. I was like, that's one of the most beautiful poems I've ever read in my life. It's so good. You just go, it hurts. When something's so good, it hurts. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody check out The Poet. Maybe I should do more readings. And, just sort of to wrap up, I wanted to ask where people can find you if they want to check you out, check your work out.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a YouTube channel, Pocha Productions. So my film company is called Pocha Productions. We have a website, www.pochaproductions.com. We have an Instagram, likewise, Pocha Productions. We have a Facebook, also Pocha Productions. And that's where most of my stuff is. And then like my more personal Instagram is Sestina1. That's SESTINA, the number 1. And that's like my more, like my aerial stuff or like my acting stuff mostly. But that's where you can find me. And we'll be launching a GoFundMe to try to help get some money together for my next short, which is going to be called La Mano, which is a telling of basically generational trauma and looking into the sexuality of my abuela, who after my abuelo died, moved on with her life late in life, and I was very inspired by that because she felt a lot of resistance in that decision to move on with her life. And I was like, we had this experience where we went to this funeral and I was like, this is a film. And so that's my project after Friends in High Places is we're going to start raising money for it and hopefully be filming by 2020, La Mano.
Yeah. And how did Pocha Productions come about?
Well, initially I wanted my company to be called Colibri Productions because I love colibris. But that was taken. It's a documentary, it's a very nature oriented film company.
Got it.
And I was drawn to the word Pocha because, well, first off, alliteration, like P&P, Pocha Productions, but also it kind of ties into my relationship with language in that, I'm always getting corrected in Spanish, but I'm grateful. Also, I'm always grateful. But yeah, it's. I felt like I had to find a word that kind of I felt like would cover all the different themes that I might investigate now and in the future. You never know what you're going to investigate later. So I wanted something that could kind of just, I feel like would still ring true no matter where my explorations as a writer took me. And to me, the image of the Pocha being, very of the United States, but also very much tied to her roots as well. And so that image spoke to me. And so I was like, all right, that'll be the name of my company.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, and my very last question, and I lied to you earlier, this is in fact the hardest one, is I always ask my writer to title their episode. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. You can put anything you want in the blank. It can be more than one word. You can switch them around. Just whatever feels true to you, how you identify, maybe the type of writing you do, or even this conversation, just so that people sort of know who you are. And if that's also them, they'll know that they have a friend. Yeah.
I would say I am a mixed race Latina Sirena who is looking for a way to make things whole.
Love it. Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Again, I saw your film and I knew I had to talk to you. So thanks again for reaching out.
Thanks.
That's the perfect way to get on this podcast. Just ask. But yeah, thank you. Check out Friends in High Places coming soon.
And La Sirena, which is, we'll be launching it on Amazon pretty soon. We need to do another pass at editing some of the sound so that it's more geared towards an internet streaming. But we'll be posting